You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is July 15th, 2026, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we're bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. Today, we're going to talk about some issues of judicial activism, some of what's going on with the courts on that, also, too, some of the amping up of threats of political violence that are also a little bit tied to the court, but just politics in general. And then we're also going to talk about, if we have time for it, we're going to get to Hochul's recent central planning edict on artificial intelligence and the wisdom in her thinking she has the intelligence to regulate that. And finally, we have a Knucklehead Noise Patrol on Representative Summer Lee, who sounds suspiciously like a younger version of Maxine Waters, Maxine Waters 2.0. But before we get to any of that, let me introduce you to our panel today. Again, with us, we have Leon Ward Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. My name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. Also, too, usually we, we haven't had a guest in a while, but we're working on getting a few guests lined up in the coming weeks. So hopefully we'll have some, new interviews for you coming up soon. But let's see here now. At this point, usually I have the screen shared, and now I actually have to open up some stuff used to. So hold on just a second while I bring up our quote of the day here. As it is time for our quote of the day, the one that sort of sets the stage on some of the stuff that's usually related to what we're going to be talking about. And this time we are going to revisit former Justice Anton Scalia. And of course, he was big on originalism. And we talked once about a quote that he had that was kind of related, but this one's just a little bit different. And on this one, it says, it is simply not compatible with democratic theory that laws mean whatever they ought to mean, and that unelected judges decide what that is. And I think in a nutshell, that's kind of what judicial activism is. You know, they have this idea that you can sort of legislate from the bench, that whatever the public feels at the moment, and then you're just sort of hoping that the judges feel that way too, and then the judges just sort of just shoot from the hip and decide whatever the flavor of the day is. And I think that's what he was getting at. And of course, that can lead to all kinds of problems, especially in a society that's supposed to honor contracts and property rights, where those things are supposed to be pretty bulletproof over time, not supposed to change a lot. And if you have laws that kind of just change with the whims of the public and the courts, then you never really have solid contracts or property rights. What are your thoughts on this one, Leon?
Antonin Scalia is getting at a very serious issue that is currently ongoing in our society. So take, for instance, this big issue of executive orders that Trump, as the elected president, have been made a lot of use of. I mean, he was well within his authority to do so. And we have these unelected judges striking them down, telling them, putting nationwide injunctions on them. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, and doing all sorts of things. I mean, of course, in every presidency, we have some of this, but we're seeing in the Trump administration, these things have become quite excessive in terms of where you could have some judge, a district judge in Podunk, USA, could tell the executive branch of government, the US executive branch of government, what they can or cannot do. Now, our constitution, our constitutional framework, requires the separation of powers. We have three branches of government. We have the judiciary, we have the executive branch, and we have the legislative branch. And each of them each has their own authority as derived from the contract that you were talking about initially. And that contract is the Constitution. But we have these activist judges that are becoming quite prominent right now, where they think they could interfere with the actions of the executive branch excessively. Now, I'm not saying I'm not saying that the executive branch of government should be immune from scrutiny. They must be scrutinized. This is part of our constitutional framework. But what we are seeing now going on is activism, not people interpreting the law. It's plain and simple activism. And this is a serious problem because what is happening is that these activist judges are making our constitution mean nothing. Because if they don't like what Trump is doing, well, they feel free to strike it down, to do whatever they think that they should do to it. And where they get this authority is beyond me. So Antonin Scalia is absolutely correct. We have laws that are passed. We have a constitution that is passed. And we must live by the rule of law. But then we have these judges trying to say what that law should mean. They are unelected and they're going sometimes way beyond their boundaries. So this is really truly a contradiction within our constitutional framework, that we have no checks really upon the action of some of these judges. And I mean, sure, Trump could appeal the decisions and all that kind of stuff, but it interferes with the proper functioning of the executive branch of government. And this is a serious issue. Too much activism and too little actual interpretation of the law. And this is a serious problem.
Yeah. And, you know, I think maybe one of the key interesting words here is unelected judges. And, you know, it does beg the question because, I mean, the lawmaking is supposed to be in the legislative branch, and that is the elected, you know, group of individuals that are supposed to be carrying out the people's will in a lot of these cases within the constraints of the Constitution. And then, of course, the president has a little bit of latitude in interpreting what they're saying as he executes. And then it's the court's responsibility to step in and say no or yes, as far as the case may be, with whatever those actions are. But, you know, this is the thing. Even if those judges were elected, right? I mean, that would almost be more dangerous, right? Because that's the whole reason they're not elected, is that we're appointing people through the executive branch that are supposed to be, I guess, just they're supposed to be going with their legal expertise. They're not supposed to be, you know, just sort of feeling out the will of their constituents the way a lawmaker does. I mean, we see the way these people sort of whore themselves out constantly, right, to whoever's offering them the most money. And we were trying to get away from that with the court, you know, from that constant influence. So, you know, so I certainly, you know, they're not elected, so they shouldn't be making law. But on the other hand, too, even if they were elected, the last thing we want them doing is sort of going with whatever the public wants them to do, you know, from the bench, right?
And
so,
making law. They're not supposed to be. They're not supposed to be making law. They're supposed to be interpreting the law, which is their actual function. And this interpretation of the law have gone way beyond the boundaries of what you will call judicial prudence, and we are really seeing too much of it going on during the Trump administration, where I think if you look at nationwide injunctions, I think Trump, if you look at the last 20 presidents, I think Trump is leading the pack in terms of national injunctions, leading the pack by a good amount. And this is really seriously problematic. It really is. And there's one aspect of the judges that we should always keep in mind. Not only that they are unelected, but they are appointed and confirmed by the Senate with lifetime appointments. And, you know, I mean, I can see the wisdom of it as the founders designated this. I can see the wisdom of it to keep them from legislating or keep them from interpreting the law based upon the winds of the moment. You know, that, well, the voters are feeling this way or the voters are feeling that way, so that's how I'm going to interpret the law. They are trying to get away from that, and I fully understand that. But this lifetime appointment, unelected, lifetime appointed people, is potentially a problem. It really is, and we're seeing too much of it these days.
Well, and also too, what we've seen recently in a related story is lifetime elected officials in the Senate who are either dying in office or need to be carted out of office
Yeah.
because they can't function, like Mitch McConnell.
Yes.
What was that gal's name from California, the senator who didn't seem to know where she was half the time?
Feinstein.
Feinstein, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we just had Lindsey Graham pass away in
Yes,
office.
he was there a long time.
And he wasn't as old as most of them. He was a youngin comparatively.
Compared to those guys, he was just a year older than me. Yeah, and he's dead. But we have Chuck Grassley, who, I mean, he seems to still have all his marbles on. He's a senator from Iowa. I believe he's in his late 80s or maybe in his early 90s. I think maybe late 80s or something like that. I mean, it's unbelievable that these guys, sit around and maybe sometimes they probably kind of lost their way. Mitch McConnell, I mean, sure, we need our Republican majority, but Mitch McConnell looking like he's lost for half of the times. A couple of times he froze up in front of the camera and nobody know what the hell is going on. He's been hospitalized here since June, and he just put out something saying all this and that, blah, blah, blah. If you look at the picture, you have to wonder if this is any proof of life. I don't know.
Well, I tell you, I do think it's good that they're appointed long enough to outlive whatever administration puts them in place, because I do think that adds some stability to the system, that if they were replaced on a schedule that was, just regular with every administration, I think then you might have a lot more dramatic changes from administration to administration if every time somebody was elected, they got their way with the courts every single time. So,
yes.
Yeah, but I do kind of agree with you that if somebody's sitting on the court for maybe 35 years, that does seem to be a little long.
Yeah, I'm telling
you.
I don't know what the solution is, because I certainly don't want, for federal judges, I don't want them elected. I certainly don't. But I always wonder if, instead of lifetime appointment, if you could have like some sort of term that maybe you give them, I don't know, 20, 25 years or something, right? And at that point in time, let them go find something else to do.
I think at least 10 to 20 years, because that would put them at least allow them to eclipse their current administration, right, and maybe another one, so that there would be more stability, I think, within the courts. So
right, yes, for sure, yes.
But anyways, so let's talk a little bit about the kind of crazy activism that we're seeing currently. And this one's not going to quite be at the national level. This is a lower court here. But recently we had the case of this woman named Hannah Dugan in one of the northeastern states. Can't quite remember which one, but we'll see in the story.
Wisconsin. She was in
Wisconsin. Okay, yeah, and she was presiding over this immigrant. I'm not sure if it was an immigration court or if it was just a regular court, but either way, he was in there to face certain crimes, and ICE agents were waiting for him, and the judge literally helped him escape the grasp of the ICE agent. So let's jump to the video so we can see what we're talking about here, and then we can discuss it a little bit more.
Disgraced Wisconsin judge gets just a slap on the wrist for helping an illegal migrant evade ICE.
Milwaukee County Judge Hannah Dugan has been ordered to pay a $5,000 fine. She will get no jail time, despite federal prosecutors asking for 15 to 21 months behind bars. Dugan was convicted of felony obstruction in December. Prosecutors say she helped Eduardo Flores Ruiz, who was in the country illegally from Mexico, escape federal agents as they tried to serve him a warrant at her courthouse last April. Ruiz was facing battery charges. He was later arrested after a foot chase outside the courthouse and deported to Mexico in November.
Surely Judge Dugan must have expressed remorse for her actions in order to avoid jail time.
Thanks so much, Maddie. It's insane that during the sentencing, she expressed no remorse, and yet they gave her a light sentence. Who does that?
Right. How she avoided jail, I don't get it. Letting out a criminal.
And so there you have it. Let's see, here's the story there from the BBC. Ex-U.S. judge spared from prison for helping migrant evade federal agents. And again, no remorse, just literally thinks she was doing a good thing by actually defying the laws. I mean, she is a court officer. She's a judge. And the idea that she's just said, whatever I feel like doing, I'm going to do because it feels right. That is the last thing we should want in our courts. So what do you think about this one, Leon?
The actions, obviously the actions of this judge, now former judge, is quite despicable because she's an officer of the court and someone is before her, obviously accused of some kind of crime. I think it was some kind of domestic violence issue that why the person was before her. But her job, for some reason, was transformed into helping this quote-unquote migrant. Okay? The guy was here illegally. Every day he was here, he was breaking U.S. law. And this officer of the court thought the best thing that she can do for this person is to allow them to escape ICE and escape deportation. Well, it didn't work out, but that's not the point. Why would an officer of the court take such action? But this really speaks to a larger problem we have in our society, is the rule of law. The rule of law is under serious attack. When we have judges doing this sort of thing, we know the rule of law is under serious attack. When we have these activist judges thinking they can and do this and do that or do whatever they want to do, interpret the law in any way that they see fit, we know we have a problem with attacks on the rule of law. We see now in our society selective prosecutions of people, and the tolerance of violence in some cases. In this judge, she was willing to tolerate the law breaking by this guy. She was there for domestic violence. He was also here illegally, and she think it was okay. And she's supposed to be an officer of the court. But this is a problem that we have in the society, these selective prosecutions and the tolerance of violence or the tolerance of law breaking. And this is a problem unless we address it. This woman is just one cog in this whole wheel, but she's a representation of a larger problem we have in the society, dealing with issues of the rule of law and who should be prosecuted and who should not be. This is a real problem because we are supposed to live in a society where there's equal justice for all. Of course, we are not perfect, but we try to strive for that. But when you see officers of the court doing sort of things, it have to make us wonder, are we really a society where we can claim and where we can proclaim equal justice under the law? We are having a real problem with this.
Yeah. No, it's nuts. And we see this happening over and over again with, different types of rules in different areas, depending upon where these judges are put in place. One of the, another case that sort of it was local case, a local criminal law, but it sort of had national ramifications when we saw it. And that was the case of this Irina Zaritska, who was stabbed to death on this train. But one of the crazy things about the judge who was in that is that the judge, before this person had been committed murder, the person who was on this train who stabbed Irina Zaritska to death, he had literally been in and out of jail so many times, and most of the times it was just judges releasing him for violent incidents where he was just put right back out on the street because either the judge had some penchant for maybe I guess some kind of treatment plan instead of actually giving this person any kind of punishment, or possibly they had other motives. In fact, here's a video of this, and again, this isn't something where it's necessarily a national injunctions type of thing against what a president's doing, but it is something where these local judges are having a lot of impact in the communities they are in. So here we go with this piece.
A North Carolina judge is under fire for releasing a man who later killed a Ukrainian refugee. Magistrate Judge Teresa Stokes released Carlos Brown Jr. without bond despite his history of mental illness and prior arrests.
Arrested 14 times previously and was released for treatment. And apparently this judge had a connection to the treatment facility, I believe. Anyways, let's go on with the story.
7 months later, Brown stabbed Irina Zarutska to death on a light rail train. Zarutska had fled Ukraine seeking safety in the U.S. Even Brown's own mother said the court system failed by releasing him. Stokes is not a licensed attorney, which is permissible for magistrates in North Carolina. Critics are questioning whether her background in addiction recovery activism influenced her decisions. Some are calling for an investigation. A legal expert says Stokes didn't adequately consider the danger Brown posed. The district attorney acknowledges systemic failures in handling mentally ill offenders due to a shortage of psychiatric beds.
So what's currently happening now with the case as far as getting justice for Irina Zarutska?
A federal judge rules the accused killer of Irina Zarutska is not ready to stand trial. Carlos Brown Jr. appeared in person before that judge this morning and at one point had an unusual outburst.
The U.S. Attorney Russ Ferguson said minutes ago he believes medication and other treatment will ultimately allow Brown to be found competent to stand trial. But as the judge ruled today, we're just not there yet.
So again, here we have another case of this judge who, appeared to be a bit of an activist. He didn't even have a law degree. She was just appointed as some political activist. And of course, she was just continuing to practice her activism as a judge. So, and of course, the sad thing is Irina may never get that, justice.
Justice, yes.
Yeah, because now this guy who shouldn't have been out on the street to begin with is now being found incompetent to stand trial. It's like, when does justice happen for the people who are the actual victims?
Yes.
It doesn't seem to be happening very well with activist judges. So what are your thoughts on all this, Leon?
There's an aspect of this case that that you cannot help but bring up. Okay, the aspect of this case that is there underneath the surface. Irina Zarutska, I believe her name was white. This guy, obviously, you could look at the picture, is black. And when he after he had committed the atrocity against the woman, he said something like, "I got the white girl," or "I got the white woman," or whatever he said. But
he said, "I got that white girl" as he was leaving the train.
Exactly.
In fact, it was caught on a video. So.
On the video, and audio also. But the point is that this will be what I don't believe in hate crime nonsense. Okay, murder is murder. I don't believe in hate crime nonsense. But these people on the left love to tell us about hate crimes. Okay, what would you call this? What would you call this? Not a hate crime? But yet you hear no one speaking about this. I will guarantee you, I will bet my last dollar, if the victim was black and the perpetrator was white, we would have had another George Floyd in America, another Black Lives Matter in America. All the racial grifters would have been out there talking about racism in America. We got to have a conversation about this. We got to do something about racism in America. And these grifters will run around and extort every major company for money, just like BLM and Black Lives Matter did. And they got $100 million. And to this day, we don't know what happened to the $100 million. We just know quite a few of these so-called activists, these people who care about us, have become quite wealthy. But the fact of the matter is, these are the sort of things that we are happening. These uneven persecutions, these uneven outrage that we see when innocent people are murdered just because of their skin color. Our action is either we are all ginned up about it, depending on the skin color of the victim, or we are quite muted, depending on the skin color. In this case, we are muted because the victim is white. And this is a real problem in our society. These people are looking for the day, I guess, when blacks will hate whites and whites will hate blacks, and we're on the streets fighting, and I guess they will have achieved their objectives to cross into that day, that unglorious day, when race riots are in the streets, on every corner of our streets. This is a cancer in our society, and we have to deal with it.
And we'll be talking about that cancer a little more at the end when we talk about Representative Summer Lee from Pennsylvania. But before we get to that, let's stick with this subject just a little more. As bad as that case is, you just see case after case like this stuff happening. And here is another case that happened recently, and I didn't prepare a video for this, but certainly these cases have been in the news where these migrant truck drivers have been out and about, and they have been, in many cases, we found that some of these people literally cannot read English, and yet they would have had to read English to pass these tests, which really starts to beg the question, I guess, of sort of how it is that these people got their licenses, right? I mean, it really does, I guess, force that question. And in this case, a migrant trucker who was 21, he wound up killing 3, and he got less than 5 years. Here's the trucker, and here's a little bit of the picture of the aftermath. But we've seen several of these. This one was in Southern California. We saw one that we covered on the show that happened in Florida, where a guy just decided he was going to make a U-turn with his big rig in the middle of an interstate. I guess he thought he was, with driving with the rules of the road in India or something. But, I mean, this was nuts. He was going right over, turning into the median, and he wound up, having a minivan just collide and kill everybody in the minivan while he was doing this crazy maneuver that, there's no way anybody could do that maneuver and have actually passed a test on stuff. But, the guy was not really given a sentence commensurate with killing 3 people here. This is just nuts. So, at least in this case, you could say the guy got some time. So maybe it's not quite as much activism with some of these other judges, but still it does. There's just a lot of questions about how these laws are being interpreted in places and how judges are carrying them out in their courtrooms. So, anyways, well, any thoughts on this particular case before we come to injunction?
I'll try to be quick because I see we're running up against the clock. But the fact of the matter is, I don't know if you remember, but a few weeks ago we showed a case of it was a case in London where a police confronted a man because he had asked somebody to speak clearly, and
in England.
In England, it was in England this was occurring. But what we are seeing is just similar things here happening, because now it's racist to tell people to speak English. It's racist to tell people to learn English. It's racist to tell people become assimilated with our laws, our way of life here, and then try to get driver's license and that kind of stuff. It's also racist.
And Leon, to hear the rest of your stuff, people are going to have to go to knuckleheadsofliberty.com where they can hear the rest of your thoughts on this particular issue, because we're out of time if you're on public access. But go check us out on knuckleheadsofliberty.com. We're going to talk about this and issues of injunctions, threats of violence to the court that are currently going on, among other issues. Back to you, Leon.
Yes. So the point is happening here that where assimilation have now become a dirty word. It's now imperialism to tell people who have come here to live within our society to learn English and become part of our society and become a protected citizen. It is racist to do this. The fact of the matter is, these are examples where these DEI policies, where these policies of the left, where these socialist nonsense is actually deadly. They're taking lives. Now here somebody comes. I wonder how I, as an American citizen, an immigrant, yes, but an American citizen, how I could get a license, one of these licenses to drive a big rig. If I could just walk into a DMV and do this. Now, I don't have very good eyes. I don't even drive in the day, quite frankly. And I'm wondering now, could I just walk in to a DMV here in California and get one of these big rig licenses? I mean, if this guy who apparently didn't even know English, but some of the we have actually seen cases where these guys cause massive accidents and could barely read a road sign, a sign on the road, whether it's a stop sign or whatever it is, could barely read it. How did these people get these licenses to drive these big rigs? In one case, I think we spoke about it on the show, there was a guy who had a license and didn't even have a name on the license that he had. I mean, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, that's true. I can't remember exactly what it said. If it said unknown or something else weird.
Yeah.
That was actual driver's license from, I think it was one of the eastern states. I thought on that one.
It might have been in New York or someplace. I don't remember. But the point is though, here I am. Okay, I am partially blind because one of my eyes, I can barely see out of one of my eyes. Could I go into a DMV and get one of these licenses to drive a big rig? Could I? I'm beginning to wonder. Maybe I could. Maybe I should try it just to see, and then I report back here on the show. I don't know. This is insane. This is insane that I'm even thinking about this.
What's funny too, when you reminded me of that whole license that said unknown or whatever.
Unknown.
Yeah.
Could you imagine that? Could I? Do I get that privilege too? To say unknown? Do I get that privilege?
Well, it reminds me of the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where unfortunately I don't have the clip handy, but it's great clip where at the end of the movie, and spoiler alert, I guess, it's a great movie, but the guy Tuco, the ugly thing, he winds up, they wrote the name on the bottom of the stone of the grave that the money is under. So he gets the stone and he reads it, he says, Unk. He reads it, unknown. He says, there's no name on it. That's because there's no name on the grave. It's unknown. But I guess that's what we're doing now for driver's licenses.
Yes.
Yeah.
God. It's insane. It's insane. This is insanity. But I mean, I know we're laughing and joking and enjoying these hilarious things. But the fact of the matter is, all of these things speak to the rule of law. All of these things speak to the separation of powers in our Constitution. All of these things speak to toleration of law breaking, a lot of tolerance of law breaking that we see going on in society. These things are really attacks upon Western civilization. That's what that is. And it really is an attack upon our Republican framework, our represented republic here in the United States. These are attacks upon these things. And if we allow these things to go on or to go any further, we are not going to have a country if the rule of law is no longer alive and well and healthy. We're not going to have a country very long if these things continue.
Yeah. Well, and these are stories we've been talking about as well that are on the local level that are having these huge impacts. But and as Leon alluded to earlier, one of the big issues is these injunctions that can happen in maybe local or maybe even cases that are working their way through the courts, possibly to higher courts. But a judge can essentially give an injunction based upon what he is seeing in his court, and a lot of times that's based upon somebody who's being tried by the government, right? So either the government is coming after them for maybe it's their violation of, maybe it's environmental law, maybe it's immigration law, who knows? But the bottom line is it's whatever the federal government is coming after the person for. And in this case, when a judge puts an injunction, it seems very reasonable at a local level that injunction would apply to the person who's being considered, because the judge wants to maybe wait until the court process is figured out before he deals out some kind of penalties to the person who's in front of him. But in these cases, these injunctions are being held nationwide based on what some of these judges are doing. And so we have this little counter that I pulled up when Leon reminded me of the numbers. So I wanted to have that to show. And this is an article called By the Numbers, a breakdown of universal injunctions. And let's see if I can't, oh, here's the date. It's from July of 2025. So this was about the time that the CASA decision, or the part of the decision that impacted injunctions anyways, and it was coming out. And so here is a breakdown that the gal put in from 2001 to 2024 of injunctions. And so you can see from that time frame, the top bar is all injunctions. Okay, and you can see Bush, Obama, and Biden. It's kind of a small to modest number of injunctions. You just barely gets over 10 with Biden. With Trump, it's over 60. So essentially, there's been this sort of judicial activism war to stop Trump from exercising his authority on a national level through local courts. So this has been kind of a thing. But in 2025, the Supreme Court, while it was going over the birthright citizenship case, it actually gave a decision, an intermediate decision in that case that at least impacted the injunctions part of this. Now, recently we talked about it last week. Birthright citizenship came down against the Trump administration, but this issue for injunctions actually came down in favor of the executive branch, both for Trump and in the future. And so that was, the White House says big win back in 2025. Supreme Court ends excessive nationwide injunctions. So I'm going to play a very quick video here that just sort of lets people see what was happening back then, and then we can talk about it.
In a 6-3 ruling with the conservative justices in the majority, the Supreme Court limited the ability of individual judges to issue nationwide or universal injunctions that apply to everybody, everywhere in the United States. The court ruled in a case involving President Donald Trump's executive order that would change birthright citizenship to deny citizenship to the U.S.-born children of parents who are in the country illegally or just temporarily.
So there you go. And that's kind of huge, right? Because it really checks the power of those lower courts in being able to check an entire federal administration. So what are your thoughts on this, Leon?
These nationwide injunctions have really been a problem, and I was really glad about the outcome of this particular case. I think it's called the Castle case, or something like that. I think they did not, at that point in time, they did not rule on the underlying issue, which was birthright citizenship. They did that a year later. But the point is, though, what was happening, and I think I kind of spoke a little about this, is that we have some judge in Podunk, a federal judge, by the way, in Podunk, USA, could just tell the executive branch of government, of the federal government, you can or cannot do this, okay? And this is unbelievable, okay? That you can have any judge anywhere in the United States. He could be in southern California, in South Texas, or wherever he has his judgeship, and he could be instructing the executive branch of government what they should or should not do. We live in a constitutional framework where we have something called separation of powers, and that's a very, very important thing, because the different branches of government is supposed to be checking upon each other. But yet, each branch of government have constitutional authorities. It's all right out of the Constitution. The executive branch has their constitutional authority, and the legislative branch and the judiciary each have their own constitutional authority, and they use this authority to check on each other, to keep each other in check. Nobody will get too powerful that they become like an imperial kind of judiciary, or an imperial executive branch, or imperial legislative branch. That is the whole idea why we have separation of powers. But everything that was being done in the name of these rulings by these judges was to create this activist imperial judiciary, where this judge in Podunk, USA, is instructing the executive branch of government how they should or should not run the executive branch of government. And one case, we had a judge who was trying to stop, the case had been overruled, but a federal judge was trying to stop the executive branch from obtaining information within the Department of Treasury. And this is a department that is under the direction of the President of the United States, who's the head of the executive branch of government. This is the kind of insanity we are seeing with this activism that is going on in the judiciary. And these things have to be stopped and curtailed. I was glad that the Casa case came out and did that. But even to this day, we still have judges trying to get around that to continue their activism. But so far, we seem to have some shutdown of these nationwide injunctions. Since the Casa case, we have not had as many. We have had a few, but not as many. And it's heading in the right direction in that sense. So it is good. It is good that we have had some checks upon these nationwide injunctions. Now we could get back to the underlying issues like birthright citizenship and all these sort of things. I think that case has to be revisited, but we don't have to go down that rabbit hole.
That was a story for another show.
Another show, yes.
Yeah. But I do have to say, though, that, you know, even in the end, there's nothing to stop individual, judges from issuing injunctions in their own court on specific things to their court. And that's reasonable, and that's also a signal to the administration, too, that if a lot of judges are therefore issuing injunctions, maybe that's a sign to the court or to the administration to maybe take it a little slower until these things are reasoned out. But the bottom line is it doesn't give those judges, those local judges, massive outweighed authority to just push their opinion on the entire country, before it's really worked its way through the courts. So, that's the whole point of the Supreme Court, right? Is to make those kind of sweeping decisions, right? So, but
yeah, and you're right. You're right. I mean, a judge should be free to issue injunctions. I have no problem with that. But the injunction should only apply within the jurisdiction of their district. That's what it should be. And then, if Trump and them want to appeal that, fine, they could appeal it. But they can't be just in poor accuracy and issuing nationwide injunctions against the executive branch of government. No, that's crazy. But,
yeah. Well, this also brings up to the idea, too, that, as government gets bigger and the decisions become more sweeping in our lives in government, that does also bring up a lot of political violence as well, right? I mean, we tend to get a lot more exercised when government is meddling in our personal lives. And, this is an article from the Pew Center that came out in 2025, and it is saying that Americans believe that violence is politically motivated violence is massively on the rise. If you look here, looks like 86% of Americans are saying, yeah, it's on the rise. So these numbers are kind of staggering, and we're seeing it in the court. In fact, just the other day, the judges, the Supreme Court judges, were in front of the Congress asking for more money for security because the threats are going up against them. So let's just get into that story real quick so we can hear about that.
According to a new report from the Wall Street Journal, Israeli officials handed over intelligence to the Americans that the Iranians...
Oops, sorry, wrong order here. Here we go. Here's the correct video.
I'm Christine Frizzell in Washington. A sign of the times when it comes to security for the United States Supreme Court, and more specifically, its justices. In recent years, the number of threats aimed at the federal judiciary has skyrocketed, with requests for more funding and resources to better protect them. 2 Supreme Court justices appeared on Capitol Hill today before 2 committees to lay out their concerns.
So let's hear what the justices have to say about it.
The threats against the 9 justices have mounted in recent years. One reason why Justice Elena Kagan is asking Congress for an additional $14 million.
Aside from annual inflationary increases, recent growth in the court's budget has been almost entirely for security expenses.
Those security expenses shifting in a major way, from protecting the actual building to protecting the justices themselves. The budget summary citing security incidents of significant concern increasing for judges by 57% in fiscal year 2025, on pace to rise again this year.
57% is a lot. Let's hear some of the specifics.
Maybe I lack imagination, but I didn't expect that performing this service was going to put me in the position of explaining to my children what a bulletproof vest was and why I had to wear one.
Justice Amy Coney Barrett says multiple food deliveries have been sent to her house under the name Daniel Solis, the son of a federal judge who was murdered back in 2020 by a man posing as a delivery driver. And in 2022, this was the scene outside Justice Brett Kavanaugh's house, targeted by someone who flew across the country with the intention of killing Kavanaugh. That suspect now behind bars.
Off our bodies,
Justices say the key turning point was the leak of the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade.
So there you go. And, of course, the big decision, the Roe v. Wade, actually had a person going out to try and essentially assassinate Judge Kavanaugh to try and change that decision. And one of the interesting things there is there was some activism happening at the Supreme Court because somebody leaked what the decision was going to be before they actually put out their decision, which is if somebody could have assassinated Kavanaugh before that decision went down, they would have had to vote without Kavanaugh. And there may not have been enough votes. I don't remember what the decision was for Dobbs. Whether it was
a 5-4 decision in favor of overturning Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
So it would have, if Kavanaugh could not vote, it would have been a 4-4 decision, and it would have the lower court's ruling would have stand.
Yeah. So, anyways, these are some of the issues that happen at these national levels, where these are big decisions, and the more and more government gets into your life, the more and more people get this agitated, right? And understandably so, to some degree. So, but let's this isn't just limited to the courts. This is other branches of government as well. So let me play a little clip as well that will talk about all of these assassination attempts that have been made on Trump. And this is the video I accidentally clicked on the last time. So here we go.
According to a new report from the Wall Street Journal, Israeli officials handed over intelligence to the Americans that the Iranians had a fresh plot to kill President Trump. Threats like this, they're not new from Iran. They stem all the way back to 2020 when President Trump ordered the killing of Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani.
I'm number one on the kill list for Iran.
The plot on President Trump's life revealed this week. 8 men across 6 states were indicted by a grand jury for allegedly conspiring to attack the UFC event held on the White House South Lawn in June. Charging documents lay out they allegedly planned to fly small drones laden with explosives near that event, which would have caused an evacuation by those attending. Then they planned to allegedly shoot attendees as they fled toward those awaiting snipers.
And of course, there have been several assassination attempts against Trump, the most famous of which happened when he was on the campaign trail.
Chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
It's a huge security concern there. People were screaming. Still unclear exactly what happened, but a very big security concern there for former President Trump. Secret Service agents now surrounding him. And they are taking him off the stage.
So, I mean, and we didn't show all of them. I mean, that was literally 2 recent plots that we saw this actual attempt here. And then, there was another attempt at a golf course. I think there was another sniper's nest or something that was found that they think was from the Iranians somewhere else. And so it is. And I think there was even some kind of harebrained idea that somebody was going to try and hit their motorcade with a forklift or something.
There was.
So,
and the Israelis just recently disclosed another assassination plot against Trump just recently.
Yeah, in fact, we saw that they changed the plane they were in. Of course, I do at least want to qualify these ones that are international. That's a little bit of a different flavor that's sort of tied to war, where you might say that when we kill the leaders of another country, that is very similar. So I wanted to mention it just because it is one thing of violence, but maybe it should be a slightly separate category than all of these people who are just at home that are affected by their own government, and they want to go out and attempt to take him out. In fact, there was another crazy story that the Babylon Bee picked up, or not the Bee, rather. So that's their nonfiction one. But there was this guy, this Marine, who is running for a representative spot or something in Florida, and he is actually running as a Republican, and he is threatening to kill, or he says the president needs to be killed.
Donald Trump is the Antichrist, according to him. He must be killed. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, there's even a video, but we're not going to play that now because it's a long video and we'd have to get to the spot. But Yeah, you can go find this on X if you really want to hear it. But this is just, everybody has amped up the violence. And I remember like we had that picture of, oh gosh, what was that woman's name? That actress, Kathy, whatever her name is.
Kathy Lee Griffin. Is Kathy Lee Griffin?
Yeah, Kathy Griffin or something.
Kathy Griffin, yeah, I think, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And she was holding up a mock severed head of the president after he won his first election,
yes.
right? I mean, yes. I remember being shocked at the time how many people had rhetoric about killing Trump at the time, and that was his first election, right? And we've just seen attempt after attempt. But to me, this is indicative of when government gets really large, we tend to see more and more violence. Because suddenly government is impacting your decisions personally. I guess let's say it this way: if I'm shopping in a Walmart, I don't get exercised if somebody on the other side of the store is making different choices than me. But if Walmart is making the choices for all of us on what we have to buy, then I think we're all going to be interested in fighting against each other to make that decision what we want. And so that's the difference between market and central planning. And the bigger government gets, the more and more planning we get that messes with all of our lives. So what are your thoughts on this violence issue, Leon?
This is really a serious issue, and I mean I know I've mentioned this several times before, but I'll mention it again. You look at the whole the Summer of Love 2020, when BLM was burning down our cities, and hardly anyone have been persecuted because of that. Hardly anyone. I mean, there were a few prosecutions as a result. But look at the number of people who was engaging in arson. There was even a couple of murders in there and stuff like that. And hardly anyone was prosecuted. And most of the people, at least the leaders of BLM, stole a bunch of money. And I haven't heard about anybody being, I think there have been a couple of prosecutions, but nothing serious enough to say that we go talk about the $100 million or so. But this gets back to a very big issue we've been talking about. The attacks upon the rule of law. And the president of the United States, the current president of the United States, have now become a symbol of, I guess, what is wrong with America as far as the left is concerned. And they're going to do everything they can to take him out. And to me, it's amazing about the incompetence of the people who are protecting the president. I mean, in the case of that picture you show, I can't tell you how I'm outraged by that picture. That picture where Trump was pulling his fist off and they were trying to take him off the stage. If you could go back to it, I can tell you why I'm truly enraged by that picture. If you look in front of that picture, you're going to see an overweight, short woman trying to protect the president. And Trump is towering over the woman. If there was another sniper, he would have been dead, quite frankly. But if you look at the back of the picture, there are men with their hands up like this, covering the president as much as they can. They're about the president's height. They're trying to cover, Trump was lifting his fist, and there's the Asian there covering Trump as best he can. But yet we have this woman leading the Trump off, and his whole face from here up is exposed. Yeah. Where's the protection? And then on top of that, the stupid who was the Secret Service director of the Secret Service at the time say, "Oh, the roof was too steep."
Yeah. Just lay the ground for that, Leon. So the controversy there is that the roof that the sniper was on had a clear view, and there were no agents on that roof. Right. Exactly. So there were agents all over the place, but there were no agents on that particular roof that the sniper chose. And there was only a handful of roofs, right? Yeah. And when questioned at the congressional hearing on, well, why was that roof that had a clear line of sight on the president not being observed, didn't have anybody on it? Because it was actually locals who spotted it. People were shouting up at the roof who were out watching, and they said, "Hey, there's somebody up on that roof." And of course, the Secret Service, I guess, wasn't smart enough to be able to just hear the people who were telling them. And it was actually local cops tried to get up on the roof first because they were listening to the people in the audience. The Secret Service, well, either wasn't listening or had other reasons not to listen.
Not to listen, I guess, yes. Well,
go ahead now with your rendition of the woman who was the head of the secret. I just wanted to, so everybody understood what the layout was for that.
Fair enough. Her name was Kimberly something. I don't remember exactly what it was. You know, this is a clear case of DEI becoming deadly. Okay, that woman should have been prosecuted for incompetence, really and truly. That she could even suggest, well, the roof was too steep, we couldn't put an agent on top of it. Are you serious? How did you get your job?
We're talking like a 15% grade or something like that, right?
Yeah. How do you get your job? I sure in my younger days I could survive on a roof like that. Me, okay, who have no special ability.
Well, and to your point about who is being hired in these jobs, the Secret Service we imagine to be an elite law enforcement organization. Yes. So you imagine somebody like Tom Cruise scaling a building or something else like that, right? And instead, it's somebody like, ooh, 15 degrees. That looks dangerous.
Yeah.
And it talks about the actual Secret Service sniper that took him out was on a similarly sloped roof.
Exactly.
On another building. So.
Exactly. Yes. Or to further your point, or to have an overweight, short woman protecting the president of the United States. Come on, I'm not against women being Secret Service agent, but for God's sake, find somebody who could really do something if the president is under attack.
Leon, I think you solved the mystery. She was probably the one who was supposed to be on that roof, and 15 degrees. that was too big of an obstacle for her, so she wasn't where she was supposed to be, probably.
But on a serious note, though, we are decaying, okay, because the rule of law is under attack. We are decaying because violence has been tolerated in our society. We are decaying because we are only having selective prosecutions going on in our society. All of this is tied into the rise of violence. People are now thinking the way to settle our differences is through violence. And this is a real problem. Chuck Schumer, who I don't know if at the time he was the majority leader, probably was the majority leader in the Senate. If not, he was certainly the minority leader. He stood on the steps of the Supreme Court and pointed at the building and threatened, listen to what I'm saying, threatened Brett Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. I don't remember what Gorsuch's first name is. The two justices on the Supreme Court. He was never prosecuted for this. We permitted this. He is never prosecuted for the threats he issued against Kavanaugh and Gorsuch.
I think the specific threat was something like, if you decide, I think it was probably Dobbs too, but he said, which was the whole abortion rights case.
Yes.
But he said, you will unleash the whirlwind, you know.
Exactly, unleash the whirlwind, right.
Something like that. If you vote the wrong way on this. Right?
So I wonder what was the whirlwind he was talking about. And talking about the Dobbs case, that the point I was going to make about the Dobbs case in particular, there was a serious incompetence in the Supreme Court. The case was leaked. It was done illegally, without a doubt. You know, we don't know who the leaker was because. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just said we don't know. Yeah, because they never. It's probably some aide or something. We have no idea.
No idea. But you know why we don't know? Because the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who John Roberts, refused to allow the FBI to come in and investigate. He said, "Oh, we could do this internally," and it was done, quote unquote, internally. The investigation was done internally, and I guess it was buried because we don't even know who the leaker was, and nobody was ever prosecuted, of course, for leaking that decision, which is a crime, eh? It's a crime.
Well, Leon, he was probably looking out for the FBI saying, we have some handicap ramps that are 15 degrees sloped and some dangerous steps. So we're just trying to protect you guys. We don't want to make you unsafe coming in here to investigate. Anyways.
Jason, my apologies for not being so smart to figure that one out. Okay.
Clearly had good intent, Leon.
but the point of all of these things, we are seeing these sort of sloppiness in our republic. That is not good. It is leading to the decay of our society. This thing where we think that the way to settle our disputes, and now we must resort to violence, that is a real bad trend. Very bad. It's not going to end well if we keep on this road, this journey of seeing violence as the way to settle disputes. I hope to God we can find a way out of this little matrix that we seem to be finding our way into.
And, you know, if a Democrat is watching this, I'm sure the first thing they would be shouting is, what about J6? What about J6? Because that's what they say about everything in response to everything. But remember, J6 even happened with the precedent of over 7 months or so of riots in the Summer of Love after George Floyd, where essentially people were allowed for political reasons to burn down and loot cities with little action in Democrat run places. In some of the red states, there was more of a law enforcement presence that kept a lot of this stuff from happening. But in these big blue cities, this was just the norm. And I think people were watching this on their TVs, and they saw people toppling statues that they didn't like, and they saw people deciding to burn stores that had nothing to do with George Floyd. Right?
Exactly.
And almost no punishment for people. And so this was a big part of the problem, right? That now suddenly you have a bunch of people on the other side who are riled up because they think an election is being stolen. That certainly seems like at least an equivalent type of concern over, what people thought happened with George Floyd in, I can't even remember what state it is now. What is it, Michigan or one of those?
It was Minnesota. George Floyd, it was in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay, yeah, in Minnesota. And, so I mean, this is, a real concern, right? That as we're been talking about, when government gets large and all these decisions are being made, and you think that the other side is literally stealing the election from you, and you've watched that the appropriate way to respond to these kinds of concerns is to tear down statues, burn and loot stores, and engage in violence. Take over in Seattle, they took over the city hall, and then they wound up taking over 6 blocks with the with the blessings of the city, and they called it the Chop Zone. In case we covered it on the show, but in case you haven't seen that, just go look up Chop Zone Seattle. And the people literally took over this area with the city's blessings, and the city was even funding the phony law enforcement, the thugs that were in that area walking around with AK-47s until until some kids got killed there by the phony law enforcement, right? That was happening. Then suddenly the city decided it was time to sweep it up after their terrible decisions. But this was the norm that was set. And to judge people that from January 6th, as though none of that had happened, as though none of that standard had been set by Democrats for over a 6-month period or more, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. The Overton window had been said it was shifted, but then suddenly when these people tried to do the same thing, roughly, it became, it just, they threw the book at them. And
of course. But who threw the book at the J6 people? Was anybody ever tried for the murder of those kids in the Chop Zone? As far as I know, I don't think anybody was. Maybe I might have missed it in the news. I don't know.
Yeah, but certainly, the city officials and in fact, I remember the mayor of that city mysteriously lost all of her email records and her phone records, all disappeared after that happened, so that nobody could actually go and trace back what she was saying. Just all been erased, just part of normal bookkeeping. Kind of like the Judicial Committee as well. When all those investigations happened, and once they were done, they got rid of all the evidence, so nobody could go back and see what they had collected. It doesn't sound like a good effort at justice if you're not willing to keep the records after the fact. So,
and that is the problem. We are hearing a lot of things going on right now. about law breaking by, I don't know if you remember who Jack Smith was. Jack Smith was a special prosecutor during the Biden administration. And he got information on you were surveilling, authorizing the surveillance. He didn't have warrants or anything like that on several lawmakers, some of them even Democrats, but mostly Republicans. And we don't know what's going to happen to this guy. I mean, are we going to let this go? Are we going to not prosecute this guy? I mean, yeah, he is a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor, a special prosecutor, but what the hell does that have to do with anything if you're breaking the law?
Yeah.
And
he was going through all of these lawmakers. He was going through their texts, I believe.
The text messages, yes, the text messages.
Yeah. So, just essentially, and he had said, oh boy, that would have been a good one to have for today's show, but I forgot. but anyways, he had actually said to Congress that they were not looking at text messages, and then they find out that they were. So it's very much like that. Like that guy that Snowden exposed, and of course nothing happened to that guy either.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So,
I forgot
Leon,
his name. Yes.
Yeah, I mean we're kind of going long on time, so I don't know if you wanted to pass on the AI story with Hochul, save that for another week, or do you want to do it? It's up to you.
No, we can save that. We can save that for another week. I mean that kind of story is not going to go away because these data centers are becoming all over the place, and I'm sure there are going to be more issues and more stories about them. So we could pass on that for the time being.
So we'll talk about the Mayor or Governor Hochul trying to put the brakes on data centers on another show, because that's kind of an interesting thing, but not really related to the topics we're talking about today. So we'll pass on that. But let's get to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol then. And in that one, we promised we're going to talk about Representative Summer Lee. I'd never heard her name before. I wasn't really paying attention, but this came across my feed, and I couldn't believe how outrageous her comments were. Sounded just reminded me of maybe a younger version of Maxine Waters 2.0, we'll call her. So let's play the clip, and we'll get into debunking some of what she said, because this is the kind of, well, Leon was talking earlier in the show about the toxic racism that, the toxic hate and division that some people are injecting into our country. This person's clearly one of them, and she's a representative from Pennsylvania. So here we go.
Having all white male doctors is just as bad for the medical profession as having all white male congressmen is to our government. The life expectancy for Black people in my district is 8 years earlier than white people. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility programs exist because marginalized people are more likely to be or underinsured, unable to get an appointment, or be misdiagnosed, to have their pain ignored, and to be discarded by the healthcare system altogether. Disparities exist at every step of the process. This is just a fact. And conservatives' discomfort with facts is not grounds to overhaul the medical education or medical education system.
So Representative Lee started out her rant by lamenting that the problem was having all white male doctors. But actually, that's the farthest thing from the truth. I can tell you that my experience is I haven't had a male general practitioner who was white since I was a teenager. So it has been many decades since I experienced that. But you can actually see the statistics out there if you just go and look at them. I found this paper in an NIH publication here where they talk about the racial breakdown of doctors versus society's breakdown in 2019. And you can see on the chart of the population breakdown from 2019, the demographic is about 60% white, and then the percentage of doctors in that same year, white people are not represented more than their race. In fact, they're underrepresented if you looked at it that way. Whereas blacks are also underrepresented. The group that is actually way overrepresented is Asians, which a much bigger percentage of the population. So you can see that in these two charts here. But let's go on and hear the rest of her rant, and then we'll talk about some other numbers as well.
Let me just say, I have a Black doctor, and I sought my Black doctor out. In fact, Black doctors are in high demand because Black patients know that culturally competent care can be the difference between care and cure, or life and death. Do Republicans want Black patients to die? Do we want women to die? Do we want trans kids to die? Because we know that a cultural competent education, that cultural competency and diversity in our education system, our medical system, saves lives. Republicans care more about culture wars than culturally competent care. And as long as they get reelected, they don't care who dies along the way.
So there you go. I mean, it's just absolutely a demagogue for pushing poison into society on this.
That's our understatement, Jason. Come on, that's an understatement.
But here's the thing. I mean, I just wanted to touch upon a few things. I mean, one, we do have this graphic. Here is the from the NIH. You can see where that's. Oh, excuse me, I didn't pull it up on the screen. From the NIH, you can see this this graph represents the population. That's what we were showing before. 57% white, 17. Or excuse me, that's not the population. That's the breakdown of doctors. So 57% white, 17% Asian. And here's the breakdown of the population. And it is 6% Asian and 60% white. so you have a much, it is literally Asians who are disproportionately more than their population, who are taking up all those doctor spots. And of course, they have a large percent of unknown who, that's the healthiest part, right? I mean, the ones where people really didn't give a shit what their doctor's skin color was, right? This woman really cares about that, this Summer Lee. To me, it's been so long, I just really don't even think about it. I just, does the doctor seem competent to me? But, that's from our National Institute of Health 2019 numbers. But I wanted to bring up something else she said. Life expectancy. She was talking about how life expectancy for Blacks is so much lower than other groups. And she then puts that completely on the medical situation. But here is another NIH publication where it says, the effects of homicide and life expectancy by neighborhood, race, and ethnicity in Los Angeles, California. So maybe there's some other studies out there too, but this is just one, that I found right away before the show. And they looked at data from 2001 to 2006. And what they were finding was that they looked at two different areas. They looked at the overall county of Los Angeles, and then they looked at the urban areas of Los Angeles. And I think the urban areas probably, so overall, what they wanted to show was that for Blacks in general, if you could totally get rid of homicides, you would wind up adding over a year to the average Black person's life, whereas for whites it was only a tenth of a year. Right. So, I mean, that is literally a big difference. And when you broke that down further into Black males, and this is for the overall Los Angeles County, now suddenly the difference for Black males is 2.1 years. And that's because so many young people are killing each other in some areas. Right. And for whites, it's 0.2 years. Right. So over almost a 2-year difference. Now you get to the urban areas and it's the story is even worse. This is for all Blacks, it is a 2-year difference. And for all whites, it's 0.3-year difference. And for urban males, this winds up being 3.6 years, right, of changed life expectancy. And for urban white males, it's 0.5 years. So you're talking about over a 3-year race gap difference because of violence that's happening. And a lot of this is Black on Black crime. This woman, this is a huge issue, and she's just completely race betting, race hustling. She's ignoring this serious issue because she has these deranged issues like it's some, KKK guys or something who are making life hard for Black people. And in reality, there is a cultural problem that is happening in some of these urban areas. And, if this woman would stop focusing so much on the race hustle and start focusing a little bit on how to change the culture of some of these urban neighborhoods, then, they might actually save a lot of lives. What are your thoughts on this issue, Leon?
I think you're giving these racial grifters a little too much credit here, that they could even think through these things. I mean, this Black on Black violence is a very, very serious issue in urban America, not only in Los Angeles County. This study was primarily done in Los Angeles County and probably in the
just Los Angeles. I can't imagine what it would be in Chicago.
Well, oh God, we'll be talking about far bigger numbers, I think. But the point is, though, these racial grifters who love to tell us about all these culturally competent medical care is a problem, and how Republicans trying to get people killed or whatever nonsense she can say. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the underlying issue, homicide, where it's black on black violence, is having a huge impact upon these areas. It is affecting people's quality of life in terms of education, in terms of little kids getting to school, in terms of people getting to work, all these sort of things. The drugs is a big problem in many of these communities, but the grifters cannot talk about these things, because that will mean that the people within these communities have to take personal responsibility, which is a big part of our freedoms. But these grifters will always see that boogeyman, the white man. The white man is causing this, It's always the white man. But we can't even say black on black violence is causing a lot of these problems, and it's affecting the lives of the people who live in these communities in very, very adverse ways. But we have to keep up the grift. Now, remember something here also, okay? This is an election year, and we're going to see a lot more of these sort of things. They may come in slightly different forms, but the grift is always going to be there. They have to gin up the black base, because that is where they're going to find the votes to fight the evil Trump and his MAGA movement. That is where they're going to find the votes. So please don't be surprised when we see more of this racial grifting going on, and we are going to see it. I promise you that.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit too. I recently watched a podcast from Trigonometry where they interviewed Roland Fryer, who is a research economist, and he did a huge study that made a lot of noise back when Obama was president, about the issue of how many black people were really being shot by cops. And what he found out was that the numbers were actually a lot lower than
than the media would tell you. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he said he totally expected, based upon the common wisdom from his party of the left, because he I think he felt like he was a little bit on the left. He thought it was going to be a slam dunk. He was just going to find the numbers, talk about it, and that's it. And he found numbers that were he was doing real science, not the science of just confirming whatever Democrats think about things. He was doing real science where he was, looking at the numbers, and, kind of like a good Chicago economist. In fact, he praises Gary Becker quite a bit too, also another Chicago economist. And that,
yes.
Well, yeah. I think he might have had him as a professor or something. But the point is that, by ignoring these things, by living with these lies, that's what feeds into something like the George Floyd thing, right? Where suddenly people see this guy who's a criminal, and the law enforcement wound up maybe not doing the best method possible, but there was a lot of conflating issues there going on, right? I mean, the guy had lethal levels of drugs in his system, and they tried to put him in the police car first, not put him on the ground, and he claimed he couldn't breathe in the police car.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
They took him out and put him on the ground. I mean, that wasn't the narrative. Everybody went with this narrative of, oh my God, cops are killing, black people. They're going out to kill black people, and that leads to so many problems when we misidentify the problem, so suddenly, just like with this case, with this, Summer Lee saying all white doctors, which we clearly showed they're underrepresented by the population proportion of white people. There are less percent of white doctors. So it's not like whites are somehow stealing all these jobs from other people. If anything, it's Asians are massively overrepresented from their community as doctors. And of course, she's not railing against that, because that's not the narrative from her party.
It doesn't fit nicely. It doesn't fit nicely into our racist rant, you see. It doesn't fit. If I could talk about personally, I have a general practitioner, my primary doctor. I didn't even give a shit. I don't know if he's from Indiana or Pakistani or whatever he is. All right? That's my primary doctor. I've had him for quite a number of years. My eye doctor had to send me to San Francisco to some to some specialists down there to try and deal with my eye problems, both Chinese. Okay, I don't give a shit. I want to know that these people can solve my problems for me as best they can, and for the most part, they have been very good and very successful. So I keep seeing them. Right, I keep seeing them. I mean, you know, my eyes are not good, but they have been able to maintain what I have, and that's a personal story. That's my personal story. But the fact of the matter is, these grifters always look at race, skin color, and we get these new terms like a competent cultural medical care. What the hell is that? What the hell is that? If somebody flying a plane, do you think I'm going to give a shit whether that person is black, white, blue, or pink? Do you think that's what I'm going to care about? I'm going to care whether the pilot can get me from point A to point B. That's what I want. Or me and my family in particular, point A to point B. That's all I care about. I don't care what color the pilot is. I just want to get wherever it is I'm going. If I'm coming home, I want to get home safely. But these grifters want to tell us that the system is going to be better if we take this race and ethnicity into consideration. It is nothing but a bunch of bullshit that's going to get us killed. Just like you see that picture you showed me there of Donald Trump being led off the stage by this overweight DEI hire, obviously, being led off the stage. If there was another sniper taking shots here, Trump would have been dead, okay? That woman is in no position to do her job, and her job was to take the bullet for the president if it became necessary. She was in no position to do it. DEI will get us killed, and this woman, this racial grifter is doing nothing but with this cultural competence medical care. How are we going to do that? Through some DEI program, which is going to get a lot of people in America killed if ever fully instituted. This is insanity on steroids.
Well, and the sad thing is it misses the problem. So the real problems that she could be taking care of are issues of violence in these urban areas.
Yes.
You know, what are the underlying roots of that? Like, you know, maybe a lack of fathers in the home, other issues like that, right? You know,
Sure.
you take care of these real issues, and you might actually, you know, save a lot of lives, right? I mean, you know, you're talking about there'll be a lot of people who will then grow up to be fathers instead of, you know, winding up a statistic, you know, when they're, you know, just a wasted life at 20 years old or something.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And she is misdirecting. But even worse than that, I mean, it's like you said, you don't bother to check the race of the pilot when you get on the plane. I don't either, right? But the problem is that these race hustlers make this such a big deal that they wind up causing there to be some actual differences with racial outcomes because of their policies, right? They wind up getting issues where, you know, because of their terrible schools and other things like that. Now suddenly you've got people who, because they've been I guess infantilized to think that everything is about race. Now suddenly some of it does start to become about race, but not because there's a real difference in our race, but because they've been treated differently by government for such a long time.
Exactly.
You know, yes. So it's just terrible, and it's it just keeps the problem going on endlessly. And I guess that's government's job, right? If the problem goes away, then people start questioning the need for the government entity there. So yeah, don't look for a solution for government for any issues of race, because we'll never get out of this racial thing.
But when there's not enough racism in society, these grifters come out with gin up more racism to keep their money flowing, you know, or keep on getting their nice perks being a member of Congress, them kind of stuff. That's how the racial gifters survive. They are just the first step to something like SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, who is supposed to be a civil rights organization. But you know who they were funding? They were funding the KKK and a company. Okay, that's what these grifters do. Okay, and with the SPLC just did it in spades. That's all. But they all do the same thing. They have to gin up racism to make sure they could keep the money flowing. That's it. That's all.
The race hate false flag brigade of the SPLC. So there you go.
I think I'm going to steal that one, Jason, and I'm not going to give you credit for it.
mysteriously, they always show up before elections.
There we go. There we go.
that there wasn't a reason for them to show up a year ago, but now suddenly within 4 or 5 months of an election,
of course,
for them to make themselves notice, but all with masks on, so nobody can see them. Like all the leftist protesters also wearing masks. Isn't that odd? In fact, the Democrat Socialists of America, I heard they recently had a meeting, and over half of them were still wearing the COVID masks. So anyways, but I think we're just about getting to the end of the show here. I did want to bring up Scalia's quote again, just to tie it all together. And the bottom line is, it's it is simply not compatible with democratic theory that laws mean whatever they ought to mean, and that unelected judges decide what that is. So, we've heard a lot about these unelected judges deciding what that is for the whole show, and hopefully, this has cemented it all together a little bit. Any last thoughts from you, Leon, before we exit? Or
the unelected judges who have become activists presents a major problem for our society. And while I want the judges to do their jobs, but I expect them to interpret the law judicially, not to be activists because they disagree with Donald Trump. This is a very, very serious problem this unelected branch of government is creating for the rest of us.
Yeah. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with Donald Trump, or even, making that politically known. The issue is if you're trying to bend the laws
yeah, exactly.
to amplify your disagreement with Donald Trump.
I voted for Donald Trump, and I disagree with him all the time.
There you go. So anyways, that's our show for today. By the way, one other announcement I just want to make, but I just found out the Libertarian Party of Sacramento will have a booth at the State Fair, at the California State Fair. So if you happen to be there, check that out. I might even be there, not sure yet, but on a few days. So, come chat with me about what you like or don't like about the show, if you catch me. But otherwise, all I got to say is think about how you can promote liberty in your community, because whether it's a judge, a politician, or just some local activist, everybody seems to be coming for your liberty. If you don't stand up and do something about it, you won't have it very long. So try and move the ball in your community where you can make a difference. Thanks so much for watching. Until next show, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.